in there? Communication Engine 3, we just got reports that we have a child inside. We're going to be going into rescue mode and passing command.
Joe, we got 3 kids inside. 3 kids in the back. This one's clear. You're right here, hold on, not yet.
I currently work for the City of Lodi Fire Department, which is a small municipal fire department in the Central Valley of California.
I'm a physician in the Firehouse as a reserve firefighter, and then I'm also a paramedic in Sacramento.
I retired from the fire service on post-traumatic stress.
Usually each day we have about 3 to 4 hours worth of training done, and that's us gearing up in our turnouts and going out in the 100-degree weather and doing it.
About 72% of them are medical. So not necessarily all of them being trauma related, but 72% medical aids.
Critical incident is something where if you have the feeling of the drop in your stomach or you're scared, you're nervous about something, I relate that as a critical incident.
Critical incident to me means that it has maxed me out emotionally, I guess. To me specifically, it means that I am not only thinking about that call and thinking about that situation or that scene or what happened on that in the time that I'm dealing with it, but also then taking it home with me, whether it's back to the firehouse or even back to my own house, and I continue to think about it or talk about it, then obviously it was enough to affect me in a way that I would deem it critical.
I would say there's a couple of events that probably put me over the edge. In 2005, I responded to a high school for a student down for a seizure.
In being here, some of the calls that stick with me the most, I would say, are the suicide by trains, just because it doesn't even look like a body, it doesn't even look like a person. It's something that you can't even imagine to see that.
When we entered the gym, the coaches running the PE class were already down on the floor with this kid performing CPR. He was cyanotic already, didn't have a pulse. They had their defibrillator hooked up to him. We took over, continued with CPR. That person made a 98% recovery. It was great. Unfortunately, there came some lawsuits with that, so there was some stress that went along with that call.
It was my first day, 10 minutes in, and a pediatric code had come through the doors. And a code is pulseless, not breathing. We didn't really have much story. There was a short ETA to the hospital for the transporting ambulance company that brought it in. They're just wheeling it in as fast as they can, the fastest I've ever seen a gurney move. I was assigned to what's called a recess room, which is where all the major traumas come in, because I was an intern. I need to learn, I need to be hands-on with the most critical things. And they brought in the baby, and immediately a doctor pointed at me and said, "You, CPR."
5 years later, I'm working at the same station. We receive a call for the high school for a student down on the gym floor for a seizure. When we walk through the gym doors, the same thing is happening. Coaches are down on the floor doing CPR with a student, have their defibrillator hooked up. That student did not survive. It was not a pretty scene. We worked him all the way to the hospital, in the ambulance, in the ER. It became a traumatic scene.
We have a technique called encircling hands technique, that you put your thumbs over the sternum, wrap your hands around, and I was doing CPR on a 3-month-old baby 10 minutes into my career. And that's an image that I will never forget. I don't talk about it much. It's not something I think a lot of people need to know. The parents never showed. The word we got was kid was picked up at the gas station across the street, and the baby was pronounced as Jane Doe. So no one knew her name. She was 3 months old. And that's probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to see.
I immediately thought of my call 5 years before that, and I wish I could say exactly what it was, but I just kind of snapped. And I knew that I was, I guess the best word is non-functional. I was going through the motions, but I knew that I was kind of checking out mentally. I didn't want to deal with it, even though I was physically doing the work.
The unfortunate part about the fire service in general is the machismo is so great that guys don't like to talk about their feelings in general, especially when you get a type A personality or a macho personality involved. They don't want to share their feelings, but that is a way that I have found for me that is the best way to deal with it, is to just talk about it. I mean, it doesn't have to be with tears, and it doesn't have to be hugging and this very emotionally wrapped up thing, but just talking about it helps for me.
The thing that made me stay was, part of it was everyone after. We immediately went to another room where the group who was working the child, there was about 20 of us. 20 of us around that little tiny baby in a hospital bed, and we all went into a room and talked. And people cried, people said how they feel, and they were talking about, times when they had gotten a baby back. And hearing the stories told me that's something that can happen. We can get people back. I want to be a part of that. I still remember that call of that little baby. I can still picture it in my head. A lot of people hold on to stress, and it eats away at them.
I definitely could have probably done something about it, but I had no idea. I didn't know what was going on with me. I didn't realize that it was these calls that I was going on. And I didn't realize how bad it was.
I mean, just this last Sunday, we had a firefighter from Katy, Texas, and he just committed suicide on shift. He was 2 years into the job.
So the management of stress in general isn't just a solitary thing for you, although you need to do it for yourself because you need to for your well-being. But I mean, the saying is you're only as strong as your weakest link, and unfortunately you're not the only one that is riding around in those rigs. You've got 2 or 3 or 4 other people riding around with you, depending on the size of the department that you have. And if your head isn't in the game, that means you're affecting them as well. If you're not doing your job, we all have a job, we're all a cog in a wheel, and if one of those is not firing for some reason, if that's not meshing, it's not working, then the overall situation is not going to work.
It's obviously something that needs to be talked about. And some departments will have a monthly hearing that if you want to come talk about things, come talk. I think that's a great program too. And you don't necessarily always need to go, but you might need to go that one time.
I think there's a huge importance for people to understand what critical incident stress is. I think it would have been a lot more helpful to me had we had more training on it maybe, or aware of what these symptoms are. It wears on you. And to have a critical incident and the stress that becomes of that, you have to deal with it. You got to deal with it. You can't just stuff it away. It doesn't work.
The amount of fire department suicidal rates are just skyrocketing. And some firefighters will resort to alcohol or drugs to deal with it. And that's no place anyone wants to see their brother go. And it's up to us to realize the signs. We've all been trained on the signs on how to notice someone kind of just going to their bunk and not talking with anyone. And it's your brother, it's your family. It's a dude that you run into a burning building for to make sure he gets out. You gotta be able to save him outside of a burning building too.